All right, so our first fireside chat of the day is going to be between me and my friend George. And George and I are talking about how do we do this? Because generally fireside chats are sort of these sequenced, scripted events where we're going to touch a number of significant points, and we've spoken on the phones like, what are we going to talk about? The difficulty with George and I talking is that George and I have been talking for, 5-6 years now?
Yes.
So, and many of the ideas that I'm working on right now have come out of conversations that George and I have sat around in sort of some big leather chairs and just have been going back and forth on this. So we're going to try to keep this conversational because obviously I don't think we know how to do formal.
Mind you, he's describing George and Jerry moments, right? There was not like official meetings because this is us sitting down and exchanging thoughts when we were both like in a different setting, different roles. You were a thought leader. I was just, a pawn on a chess table.
Yeah. So before we get that, so obviously, George, you're head of Fincantieri, the shipbuilder, not only in Wisconsin but also you've got holdings down in Florida as well. Why don't you actually explain what your arc of your professional development has been over the last 5 years since we started these conversations? Because you've been in and out of different situations as well until now you find yourself as the leader of a large shipbuilder on the Great Lakes.
Well, let me start by saying I'm an adopted son of the Midwest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an entire family rooting for the Green Bay Packers.
Smart man.
My adventure on shipbuilding started in Marinette, where I was directing production and production planning and everything that ran around the yards back at the time. And then I'm like the poster child of shipbuilding rotation because I've done, running the programs, running BD, running contracts, even supply chain for a moon's worth. And then I decided to move my skills or lack of thereof to Beretta and run operations there, which was an additional nice broad assembly of things to do. And it was, when was it? 10 months ago, more than a year ago that I received a phone call to say, hey, you left some unfinished business here in Fincantieri. And when I got the call, I knew that, there was a lot of challenges out there and they needed something different. I was not being called just to, continue things as they were. It was about, hey, we need to figure out what Fincantieri is in the U.S. because we've been here for more than 15 years, close to 2 decades, and we're trying to make everybody realize that we're here to stay, and B, Fincantieri in the U.S. can be a lot more than just 3 yards and 1 in Florida.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. First of all, when George came back, so I had done some business as a consultant with Fincantieri, and so when I moved over to OMB, because OMB, obviously has some contractual and fiduciary responsibilities within the federal government, just minor. I had to recuse. If there had been any commercial entity who had paid me, any amount of money for consulting, within the last 12 months, I had to recuse from that entity. And so I had to step away from, having any conversations with the company, and then the company. There's been a series of changes. Like I get this text message from a young lady named Unique, who's I consider a friend, and you can still maintain personal relationships with people even when you're accused. And so Unique just sends me this short text message, says, "George is back." And of course, I was delighted that you were back. But
to me that was weird because to me you're Jerry. So
yeah.
I was told that no, you have a specific role and you need to hold back because I was coming back and I would love advice.
Yep.
Advice on shipbuilding, what to do, what to avoid, and I couldn't get that.
Yeah. Well, and then there were some challenges. There were some challenges that happened with the company that I couldn't even be involved in from inside the government. And we're referring to the cancellation of the contracts for FFGs 64 and on that the Navy rendered in the fall. So I was recused. I couldn't play into that. You were in. How was that received, and I'm kind of talking not just from you, but from the company, but also from the region, when that word came down that the Navy was going to realign and pivot sort of away from the Constellation class frigate?
Okay, I may need a drink on this one.
Yeah.
Because when the Navy declared their shift, their decision, it was tough in the sense that we had just completed almost a year of ramping up workforce-wise, retaining and having people there, 3,000 strong people that were not there. They were there for the love of the craft, and then they were there because they felt they were on a mission. They were on a mission to deliver something for the Navy and for the nation. And how do you communicate and talk to those folks and give them a new future? How do you help them understand that, okay, you're seeking to respect the Navy decision, you're seeking to showcase you're a true partner, and at the same time, build up a new future for that workforce. So it was, it was and continues to be challenging, but you know, sometimes that's part of what drives us, quite honestly.
I remember the frustrating thing for me, one, because of shipbuilding, my portfolio, but also as a Midwesterner, that, you know, here we, the administration, I mean, the president, so first of all, I want to be really clear. I really, you know, hate like the stolen valor guys, and I also hate the stolen influence people who try to allude that they're more important than what they are. I've met with President Trump exactly one time. Had a 44-minute, I know, because they mark the calendar like the moment you go in, and they mark the calendar when you come out. So I knew it. It's 44 minutes. I've had 44 minutes one-on-one with the president. And his direction to us was very, very clear. Add capacity, add competition. Add capacity, competition. The conversation was about the icebreakers, but this was the overarching theme that I took away from that talk. So I knew from the conversation, the one time I got it direct from the man, not filtered down through the cabinet, not anything, you know, capacity and competition. And here we were in the industrial heartland of the country, and we had just made a decision that was going to kneecap a shipbuilder. And so I knew at that point in time, and again, I couldn't be involved. I could not be involved until January 21st of 2026 was the moment that my recusal ended. That we needed to figure out what could go to Wisconsin. He had the workforce that was sitting there. Where are we going to go with that? And so talk about those conversations that you were having at a time that I was not in it, about follow-on projects and programs that we could look at, you know, for the yard.
Well, I kept saying one thing, quite honestly, and I think you can relate. All I want is stability in Wisconsin.
Yep.
And that was the driver, because you can imagine discussions that were being held in terms of the contracts or the financials or the other priorities. And I kept telling them, guys, there's only one thing driving me. How do we achieve stability? And those were the discussions that we were having. And to do that, you need to, like I said, you need to give them new future. So you need to showcase something new, a depth. Yep. Not just, okay, hey, don't worry, you know, we'll cover your costs and here's a ship. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to give the folks a new mission. You need to make them feel there's a good reason for you that you have brought over here, and you have your young family around you, and you want to build a life here, and you want to do it meaningfully. There's a future here for that reason.
Well, the other thing, too, that I was struck by the fact, and I knew this, I think that with the Constellation class, you had a supplier base that touched 19 states. Clearly, the Midwestern states, you know, was heavy with your supplier base, but you also had...
Clearly, because it was conscious, quite honestly. That's one part that I loved about how we did supply chain strategy, yep, is that there's like circles that broaden. Because we felt, as you develop a meaningful activity somewhere, you need to help the entire ecosystem grow. So we went from local to regional and kept growing. So we touched, like you said, multiple states, but our key intent was to have, we have 350 vendors in Wisconsin and Michigan alone. So, yep, because the intent is to help grow, not just, you know, the giants. Some of them are here in the room, but also medium-sized companies that can grow with you as you develop that activity.
Well, the one thing about that too, that was when we did this assessment of the industrial base through the first 6 months of the administration, part of that assessment was not only shipyards but the associated supplier base, because one of the things is if we're going to add capacity, where will we add that capacity? Like for instance, I would tell you that between Newport News in Virginia and Hanwha in Philly, and then Groton in Connecticut, and then Bath Iron Works, I know that supplier base, and I know how tapped it is and how much room for growth that is. And so we're really sensitive about that strip of shipbuilding within the country, because you don't want to overburden, you want to adjust it so you ramp. But the idea that FMG was essentially the heart of a supply system in the Midwest that had much more room for growth. And so as we're looking at sort of the ramping down, but then trying to add programs, obviously looking at landing ship medium as the thing that came up in the conversations between the Navy and the company at that time, it really was all about not just your workforce, which we were really critically interested in, but also the supply base. Try to make sure that we were going to try to flow in with that, and try to keep that supply base alive as well.
Yeah, the same that I was talking about the workforce goes for the workforce, because you can imagine, since we consciously tried to develop an ecosystem of supply chain that was growing with us, that medium-sized, those two were suddenly faced with, okay, what do I do now?
Yep.
Where's the new future here for me as well now? So.
Well, speaking of a new future, so I want to pivot to one of the Jerry and George topics of interest over the last 5 years, Area 52. So when you and I were sitting down, I don't smoke cigars, but this would have been the typical situation that two guys sitting down and doing cigars and kind of really going to town, which is kind of what we would do, really these skull sessions of going over this concept of the Area 52. For me, it was all about the untapped potential of Lake Michigan and essentially the Great Lakes to develop. You took a slightly different, because you were the guy who actually knew how to build stuff, so you started thinking about, what was there with capacity to do the types of platforms that I was looking at. Why don't you share some of your thoughts on our Area 52 conversations?
First of all, back then it felt more like people sharing crazy dreams and ideas. But the more we talked, the more they made sense. The more you were embracing the sensitivity of the location, how the protected nature that it offered to develop those things, and on my end, we were fresh out of not only knowing how to break down work into multiple sites. So in my head, it was easy to say that's the type of thing where you can spruce activity and break it down and share it to multiple players, multiple entities, and help them all grow and contribute to one type of a work like this, like Area 52. And then on top of that, I was also fresh out of what Midwestern craftsmanship and work ethic means, because it's by now maybe it sounds like a tagline, but if you live it, you know it. Okay, so it's a whole different ballgame when you actually try and convince folks here to actually start up a new activity or get a machinery shop that has been proud of the work they've been doing for like 30, 40 years and show them something new, and they will embrace it, and they will not take you for a crazy person. They will actually jump in and work with you and build it up. Those are intangibles that you don't find easily anywhere else.
I think for anybody who's not familiar with the Area 52 conversation, I had done this study for Andrew W. Marshall and Net Assessment about the origins of high-tech corridors. Where did Silicon Valley come from? Where did Route 128 in Massachusetts come from? Where did Aerospace Alley in Colorado? Why did those places rise up? And then almost at the same time, I was doing this other side research about the growth of skunk works Lockheed's entity that had built the U-2 and then the SR-71 and ultimately the F-117, and then of course their test range was Area 51, the now legendary place that everyone knows about but no one talks about. So the thing that came out of that conversation was the idea that if you believe, as I do, that unmanned capabilities present the same leap ahead capability that precision strike and GPS and stealth provided to the United States back in the 1970s and 1980s, gave us a generational advantage over everyone else in the world. If you believe that unmanned has that potential, then why in the hell are we testing it where God and everyone can watch us? Why are we doing it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean as part of RIMPAC every year? Why did Fifth Fleet decide to stand up a task force and test it right in front of the Iranians in the middle of the Arabian Gulf? It made no sense to me. And so it led me, and this is where George and I started talking about, Lake Michigan is the only one of the Great Lakes. It's all internal U.S. waters. We share no border with Canada on it. Lake Michigan's 312 feet north to south. It's 118 miles east to west. And the Chippewa Basin is about 1,000 feet deep. There is so much we could do there, and we just happen to have a couple major shipbuilders that are sitting right next to it. So this is kind of where we went with the conversation about, and I was like, George, can you make some prototypes? If we had some ideas, could we generate it? Could we do it quietly? And the answer was, yeah. So Fincantieri is not just Marinette, Wisconsin. It's also a major facility at Sturgeon Bay, and they also have an aluminum manufacturing place called Ace Marine right in Green Bay. By the way, I was going to tell you, I used to really, really like Green Bay Packers, and I enjoyed going up to Lambert Field, but there's a new team in Indiana. I don't know if you've heard about it, and I'm here to tell you, I think I've got a new home team that I'm going to be able to just drive on over from the farm to go see in the future. It's going to be a great game. So anyways, exit right. So, but I think we're at this point now where we're having serious conversations about Area 52, where it's actually getting close to being real.
Yeah, mind you, when we were talking, from a Navy perspective, there was not that maturity. It was even before Task Force 59 that we were having these talks. So it was not, it was still like, what do we do with unmanned? And in a ways it still is, but at least that it's part of the future. That it's that it become part of your fleet. So now you need to attack it in a more structured way. And quite honestly, if you think about other things that have been popping up in the area, mainly on the aerial side, on UAVs. They're pointing at the same direction, right? Didn't they?
The new corridor. We just had a whole afternoon session here yesterday talking about the Midwest, essentially unmanned test corridor that's now been established. I mean, we actually have legal authorities now to do, unmanned aerial testing, essentially running up and down the middle of the Midwest.
So, I apologize, but you have water. Why on earth wouldn't you do USV and UUV?
Absolutely.
Similarly?
Well, and not to mention, General Lyle, where are you right now? Sir, do we have a few ground vehicle test ranges anywhere in the region?
Are you allowed to?
Yeah, so Camp Atterbury right now, huge ground test area. So you actually have all the space that you require to do ground, air, surface, and if we even look at the Chippewa Basin, adjusting for freshwater versus salt, and yes, I can do the TSP equation, we could do underwater unmanned testing as well. It's all here, and we would be able to do it sort of off the range. And by the way, we also have a very well-qualified Naval Warfare Development Center at Crane, Indiana, that does some of the most high-tech aspects of our industrial development here. So all of it's here.
Plus, you do have universities all around, some of the strongest ones in the area.
Well, I mean, there's at least one really strong one in the area. Purdue University is the #6 research and development university in the world. And then there's some other schools that are here too that do some pretty good stuff.
Remind me where you graduated from?
Purdue, class of '88. That's right. So
but University of Wisconsin, the Big Blue, they're all major players, and they are stepping up.
Well, and Northwestern just recently picked up another engineer, but we won't talk about that. So, but I think where the Midwest is well placed to be at this sort of leading edge not only because we pay attention to the high tech, but we pay attention to vocational and technical training as well. We can still generate workers.
Let me give you a cool example. Beginning of June, there was the Wisconsin Drives Manufacturing and Innovation event that was organized by University of Wisconsin. And we were asked to participate, help, support, have presence. We thought about it a lot, and then we said, you know what, we're gonna put in there on our table an unmanned vessel. So we put on the Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
And why am I saying this? Because you cannot imagine the traffic and vibe that it attracted of folks, whether they were like professionals or students or engineers, because they saw it as an example of the type of new tech business that you can bring into the region and make it multiply, make it attractive and more startups and other types of initiatives. You see that the folks are ready for that type of a move, and it's amazing. It's exactly the type of thing that will attract even more young talent, guide them into new directions, build them up. I'm saying this because there's a pet peeve of mine that we all talk about the blue collar and the craftsman, etc. And at the same time, I keep voicing the need for also like naval engineers, the engineers in general. We're falling behind in that arena as well.
Well, and this is actually one of the challenges that's come up. First of all, we call out the need for naval architects in the Maritime Action Plan and the Maritime, and also within the executive order. We talked about the need for naval architects and people to relook at the maritime industries. One of the challenges that I've seen for people that have come and presented shipbuilding plans to me is that there's an awful lot of unmanned vehicles that look an awful lot like manned vehicles. And one of the things that we saw, Northrop Grumman's here, right? One of our sponsors. Northrop Grumman really impressed me 15 years ago with the development of the X-47B aircraft. Mostly because this was the first time that I saw an airplane that was unmanned that did not look like a manned airplane. Northrop Grumman had actually designed an aircraft from, the wheels up that discounted the bag of mush that sits in it. And so they were able to take full advantage from an engineering standpoint for a truly unmanned vehicle. And I still look at that aircraft and I think it's absolutely stellar in its overall design so far as what it could do, the G's it could load, and what it could do. Most of the unmanned ships that I see are manned ship designs that are simply adjusted with an artificial intelligence stack on them. So one of the things we've talked about with both University of Michigan with their naval architect, but also the other engineering schools, everyone who comes in to talk to me, it's like, can you actually start from a premise that there's no human involved? Because I think an unmanned vessel should look fundamentally different than a manned vessel because of the unique, there's a lot of things that we build into ships just are there because there's going to be a guy on board or a gal. So, and I think that that's one of our key challenges right now is changing naval design.
And from a shipbuilder's perspective, that can be key, revolutionary, use whatever word you want, because it will also allow you to start designing it, both not having to consider the human factor and make a better use or different use of the spaces. Take out the complexity that the human factor provides and potentially have then space and time to consider other type of complexity. Set it up for even like self-defense and the way the hull lines will be so that it can actually be tough for anybody to take on. And in general, if you add to what we just said, things like all the other type of technological innovation that you can do when you actually try and produce those type of things with advanced manufacturing, cobots, other type of automation in mind, then you definitely start designing something from the start that is totally different than what you're used to, but actually enables you to produce in serial production and in mass.
Yep. Well, and the other thing too, and I just want to highlight just these last two technical points because of what we have here in the region, just to highlight this. Both quantum for instance. Both quantum communications and quantum computing could have tremendous implications for unmanned. The ability to communicate utilizing, the concept of the paired quanta, the use of the computers to sort of, minimize or be able to link these things as we move forward with artificial intelligence. If we really want unmanned to be able to have the maximized lethality in the force, so we can bend the price curve on the platforms and what they can do, then we really have to take advantage. And very fortunately, here in the Midwest, we have some very advanced schools. University of Chicago is doing a lot of work on quantum. Indiana University, as much as I hate to say that, is doing some really fine work in that area. And so being able to pair all the technological advances that are coming out of the region. We also have Fermilab, sitting there in Chicago that's doing, a lot of extremely advanced, research right now. So this high-tech corridor that runs from Crane up to Marinette is really, key. I mean, we're teeing it up essentially as like the next Silicon Valley.
But out of the things that we're putting together, which are all elements, what are good ways to have connecting tissue between them? Because when we were talking, like you said, 5-6 years ago, there were many layers that would allow to be that type of connecting tissue, because you need all these elements, and then you need ways, conduits through which these elements will coordinate, push further for that type of innovation to come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, we need to wrap up, but I do want to turn to you because I've kind of been asking you a lot of questions. Are there things that we've missed, parts of the conversation that I've forgotten about that you want to kind of highlight here as we're sort of moving forward and turning the page?
I think I'm going to ask on behalf of everybody, so what's next for Area 52?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, last year, I was generally shocked, when we proposed 15 ideas and the director accepted 14. So I have, after we pushed the president's budget over, I started to collect what are my ideas for the director's review this fall. And I will tell you, I've already convened an Area 52 meeting of there inside the government. And so now that we've sort of set what our level of priorities, we'll be reaching out to interested industry partners about, ideas going forward.
Well, even if you don't invite industry partners, George wants to come.
All right. Well, everyone, please join me in thanking the president and CEO of Fincantieri for joining us here today and his support for this event. Thank you, George.
Good luck.